Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Let's talk about BYU at Arizona. By the way, producer Matt, I'm going to call for the audio here pretty quickly, so just make sure you're ready, okay? But BYU, listen, BYU was definitely on the right side of the bubble coming into the weekend. And you could argue that by the time they played Arizona with some of the losses this weekend, SMU getting destroyed by Clemson, Georgia losing, Texas losing, you could argue that BYU maybe wasn't even on the bubble going into an Arizona game. And by the way, they weren't going to be punished for losing at Arizona, which is a really good team. But BYU was coming off that Kansas win. And listen, I said coming into the week, I said, I think BYU's actually playing really well. I know everybody wanted to make it about Kansas being a train wreck, which they are. But I said, I also think this BYU team is playing pretty well. As a matter of fact, coming into the weekend on our Friday show, I previewed all the big games. And while everybody was just kind of looking past this one, oh, BYU, they just beat up a bad Kansas team. Torres, and by the way, I love Arizona too, so this isn't a knock on Arizona. I had a little bit of a different perspective on BYU, Arizona.
And as far as this game is concerned, I'm actually going to call for the upset, okay? I'm actually going to predict BYU goes on the road and gets the win at McHale. Now, I've been to McHale, just like I've been to Marriott Center, an incredible place to watch a game. The crowd is going to be great, but I think BYU is desperate.
So there you go. I don't know what everyone else in the national media had to say about this one going into the weekend, but I know not many people picked BYU to go into McHale and win as a 7.5, 8-point underdog in one of the toughest places in college basketball, but they get the 96-95 win, and boy, oh boy, is there a lot to discuss. First of all, I'll say this. I think you could argue this was maybe the best, certainly most entertaining game of the weekend in college basketball. Like, Duke was incredible. St. John's was incredible. But as far as the quality of game, the quality of play, the quality of effort on both sides, this felt like a Sweet 16 Elite 8 game. I don't have the stats in front of me of this team only led by that much, that team only led by that much, but it just felt like BYU came out guns blazing, Arizona matched them, and it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth all game. And you can see why in a score that is with a 96-95 final score. All you need to know, and I don't think this is a reflection of the defense as much as good offense. Both teams shot over 54% from the field. Both shot over 45% from three. It's worth noting, both shot over 70% from the foul line as well. So great offense. Listen, we have to be realistic. The defense could have been better on both sides. But obviously, at the same time, we also have to address the elephant in the room. Because the game did come down to one big play late in the game. For people watching on YouTube, just so you know, we can't show highlights. It's against YouTube rules. ESPN has the highlights. But I will just say that with about 10 seconds left, BYU trails by one. Caleb Love had just made two foul shots to take a 1-point lead. BYU comes down. They dump the ball to Richie Saunders, who is an absolute star. He pump fakes once. He pump fakes twice. He pump fakes 3 times and kind of throws his shoulder into, I believe it was Toby Awaka's hip. He gets the foul call. It is chaos. And he gets 2 foul shots, makes them both, and BYU escapes with the win. And so after the game, listen, I gave all the credit to BYU going on the road, having that kind of moment. And of course, the second that I did that, and I love Arizona fans, maybe this is the first time Arizona fans will ever be mad at me. But listen, I said, it was a great game, whatever. And I think with the Arizona side of things, 2 things can be true. It was a terrible call. It was an abysmal call. It was awful. And I understand Arizona fans' frustration. By the way, whenever you know the name of a referee after the game, it's never good. Let's just say Tony Padilla ain't getting a lot of positive press out there in Tucson right now. And I hate to say it, Arizona, I do understand your frustration. But while I understand your frustration, here's the bottom line. At home with a week off, you also gave up 94 points in the first 39 minutes and 50 seconds of this game. And so I don't want to diminish how incredible BYU was offensively, but I also don't want to diminish the fact that, You get 2 more stops. This isn't even up for debate, okay? And it's hard for me to feel sympathy about a sketchy call when you're at home. You allow the other team to shoot 45% from three, 54% from the field. And yes, it came down to a crappy call, but it doesn't have to come down to that if you come out and take care of business. By the way, Arizona fans want to get mad at me? Guess what? You know who else sort of agrees with me? Arizona coach Tommy Lloyd, because this is what he had to say after the game.
It's a bad call. I mean, like, whatever. What am I going to say? I mean, you hate for a game to be decided by that. I mean, Trey, I feel horrible for him. The guy didn't play in the second half. I tightened the rotation. He played good defense. Guy's pivoting, throws his shoulder at him, throws up a shot and falls down. It's a foul with 2 seconds to go. I mean, listen, it's the Big 12. That's what I'm told. And the guy who called it's one of the best refs. So, we got to live with it. But step back. They scored 93 points up to that point.
There you go. Tommy Lloyd said the same thing I did. You gave up too many points at home, didn't get enough stops. And so that is my take on the referee. Now let's talk about BYU. Because again, I know I'm coming off the Provo high. I know I was just there. I just saw the whole operation in person. But if you listen to Tuesday night show after the game, what did I tell you? This isn't a one-off deal. BYU is for real. And I think with this win, they are officially off of the bubble. And I think not only are they off the bubble, I think they are officially a team that you can circle as a team that can absolutely do damage in March. And at this point, I'd almost expect them to, okay? So first of all, with BYU, the Kansas thing was not a one-off deal, okay? And by the way, the Arizona thing is not a one-off deal either. BYU had quietly, coming into this game, won 7 of their last 9, which means that they have now won 8 of their last 10. So in other words, they're playing their best basketball at the best possible time of the year. What's equally important to me is we talked about it after the Kansas game the other night, is that I feel like Kevin Young, the BYU coach, he's just figured things out as he has gone through college basketball, okay? And so, listen, we've talked about it. He came in from the NBA, never had coached college basketball. And listen, he did the thing that a lot of guys that come from the NBA do. I'm going to focus on talent. It's all about talent. It's all about NBA. I'm going to bet on talent. I'm not in whatever. And I think he had to slowly understand, hey, a lot of times veteran players win games in college basketball. And if you remember, we talked about this in the summer when we were talking about BYU putting this roster together. They got 2 5-stars that could be first-round picks. Yegor Demin is certainly going to be. Kanan Catchings is struggling a little bit, but to his credit, he was phenomenal against Arizona. But I think early on, it's bet on the young guys, bet on the young guys, bet on the young guys. And then Kevin Young kind of realized, and his staff kind of realized, like, hey, older guys are what wins games in college basketball. And so what has happened? He has relied on the older guys. We talked a little bit about this. I'm not going to go through player for player of the depth chart, but there was a player named Mawit Mag, okay? And we talked about him. I said this the other day. I saw Mawit play at Prolific Prep with Jalen Green 6 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever they were both in high school. Coleman Hawkins was on the team. Namari Burnett was on the team. And Mawit Mag was just kind of this do-it-all glue guy, energy guy, hustle guy, defend the other team's best play. That's all he did. And he didn't care about shots. He didn't care about stats. He transferred to BYU this year after 4 years at Rutgers. And early in the season was getting very much playing time. Now he's in the starting lineup, and for the most part, other teams are struggling to score on him because he's one of the best perimeter defenders in college basketball. Keba Keita, transfer from Utah, took him a minute to figure him out. He is a monster down low. Just ask Kansas. And then a lot of the guys that came back from last year are starting to thrive. Richie Saunders, as you can see, basically is playing at an all Big 12 level. I haven't put together my all Big 12 team yet. I don't know if I will. He's a first team all Big 12 guy. 23 points in this game. Absolutely phenomenal. 2 clutch free throws, 15, 16 points per game, 44% three-point shooting. Kevin Young thinks he's an NBA player. He's phenomenal. Trevin Nell, 9 points in this game. Dallin Hall did not play well, but he has been very good, had double digits in the previous 2 games against Kansas and Kansas State. And so BYU has bet on the young guy, or bet on the older guys. And listen, that's what has me so excited about this team. They're playing their best basketball. They figured out what works and what doesn't. And by the way, it doesn't mean the young players are bad. Doesn't mean anything like that. It just means that, hey, we got to roll with the veteran guys that have gotten us to this point. And I think 3, and this is an important point, there aren't very many teams that have a bunch of dudes that have played in the NCAA tournament at that school. BYU kind of does, though, right? 4 guys that were part of that team last year that was a 6 seed under Mark Pope. They lost to Duquesne in the first round of the NCAA tournament, but that was a team that made the NCAA tournament. Now they have 4 key guys back, plus several others that have played in the NCAA tournament at various points. And this is just a group of veterans, a group of grown men. And again, I think the best part is ahead of them, right? They are currently, as we record here, alone in 5th place in the Big 12, 19-8 overall. 4 games to go, and they're basically all winnable except maybe one at Iowa State's going to be really tough, but they have at Arizona State this week. Arizona State's struggling. Arizona State just threw their best player off the team on Sunday. West Virginia at home, Utah at home. West Virginia, they already beat on the road. Utah, by the way, they did lose to by 1. I think that's the other thing, too. Even when they were, quote-unquote, struggling in Big 12 play, again, 5-point loss to Texas Tech. That looks like a lot better loss than we realized at the time. Lost by 4 at TCU. TCU's a bubble team. And then, oh, by the way, the loss to Utah was by 1 point. So I could go on and on, but congrats, BYU fans. By the way, make sure to follow our Torres on BYU account. All things BYU. We'll be talking about them all March. Not to mention, I think they're going to have a monster offseason as they get set to build for next year. But BYU, hell of a win. BYU fans, by the way, don't let anybody steal your joy about the refs. You deserve to win that game. It was awesome. It was a great game.